Hello, everybody, ladies and gentlemen, in this room and all over cyberspace, wherever you may be. I hope, since it's Rosh Chodesh, the beginning of the new month after the high holiday season, so I wish everyone a very beautiful month, a joyous one, all in good health. And as some of the Hasidic masters say, this is the time where we unpack all the resources we've gathered through the high holiday season, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Sukkot, Simchas Torah. So that may all that go well. So the topic of this class is the Kabbalah of the rainbow, balancing the colors of your life. I've talked about many topics over the years that I've been giving this class, which is now back to 1982. That would make it 34 years. It's a long time. And I don't think I ever discussed this thing about the rainbow. And of course, because the first documented rainbow, is in this week's Torah portion, in the biblical story of Noah and the flood. And following the flood, find a fascinating and mysterious and cryptic narrative about how God makes a covenant, a promise, that he would no longer ever destroy the world as he did with the flood, where the entire population of the world except Noah and his family were destroyed due to their transgressions. So God makes a covenant, a promise, a bris, that there will no longer be a flood, there will never be the destruction of the world again. And as a reminder, he says, here is my rainbow that I place in the cloud, that I've placed in the cloud, that this shall remind me, the promise and covenant I make with you today, that I will never destroy the world. So ostensibly, it sounds like a beautiful story, covenant of peace, covenant of preservation. However, the question really is what is this thing called the rainbow? Now, from a purely human point of view, rainbow is one of those marvels that gets our attention. You see a rainbow, most people look. You know the colors of the rainbow. Now we know there's 7 colors. And it's just a sight to behold. May not last long. Science, of course, describes it as being the refraction of the light. After the rain, the droplets that are in the mist of the atmosphere. So the refraction of light creates the colors, and it's interestingly always the same 7 colors, starting from red, going to violet. The 7 colors. I believe they are red. If I recall correctly, red. I know violet, indigo. I know yellow is in there. Green, blue. What am I missing? Orange. I think it's red, orange, green, yellow, blue, violet, and indigo. Is that how you pronounce it? Indigo. And we'll talk about that as well. But what is it about the rainbow that mystifies us? What is it? And when you read this narrative, and especially when you're familiar with the mystics they say much about the rainbow, which we shall discuss. And it'll be quite surprising, as I was surprised when I first learned about it, the profound relevance of a promise that's made 4,121 years ago. That's when God made the covenant. And it's as relevant today as it was then, if not more. And that's the theme of the discussion we're going to talk about today, the rainbow. And of course the rainbow, not just in the general natural sense of it, but also the rainbow as it reflects in our lives. But a few very obvious questions in the biblical narrative. So, okay, God makes the promise. When you read the verses, it seems a little strange. First of all, why rainbow? I mean, there are many ways to make a sign, a covenant. You know, there are a lot of things in nature God could have chosen. Why a rainbow? Number one, when in Hebrew is a keshes. Number two, it appears from the verse that God says that I may consider destroying the world again, but I will see the rainbow, so it will remind me. Does God need a reminder? Is his promise not enough? Literally says it will remind me of my promise to you. And when you read it even closer, you see, let me just pull it up so you can read it. Just go to the actual verse. Here we are. I'll read the actual verse. He says, and God said, this is the sign of the covenant that I give between me and you and every living being that is with you to generations forever. So clearly it's something for all time. I have set my rainbow in the cloud. Right there, what does that mean? My rainbow in the cloud. And it shall be a sign of the covenant between me and the earth. And it shall happen when I place a cloud over the earth, and the bow will be seen in the cloud. I will remember my covenant between me and you and every living being among all flesh, and the water shall never again become a flood to destroy all flesh. And then he repeats, and the bow shall be in the cloud, and I will look upon it to remember the everlasting covenant between God and every living being among all flesh that is on earth. And God said to Noah, this is the sign of the covenant that I have confirmed between me and all flesh that is upon the earth. So besides the elaborate and seeming redundancy, what is the point of remembering? So why a rainbow? What is the significance of all of this? God wants to not destroy the world, just don't destroy it, and that's that. So clearly it shows that there is a issue going on, because why would also God have to make such a covenant? Didn't he create the world in the first place? He didn't create the world to destroy it. He didn't create a world to destroy it. The fact that the flood was an anomaly. So the whole episode, when you think about it, requires a lot more elaboration. Then there's another question that the commentaries all ask. We all know that a rainbow is a natural phenomenon. After a rain, as I said, due to the droplets that refract the light of the sun, you have like a prism. Like if you shine the white light through a prism, it bends the light, it refracts the light, and you see the colors. We can create artificial rainbows. So it's basically a natural phenomenon, part of the laws of nature. Here, it appears as if the rainbow is some type of miraculous creation of God created to show a sign. It's a natural phenomenon every time it rains. So are we to say that every time we see a rainbow, that's a moment where God was about to destroy the world and the rainbow came to remind him? It's a natural phenomenon that precedes the story of the flood. Anytime it rained for the first 10 generations between Adam and Noah, most likely there may have been a rainbow. So the commentaries all wonder, what exactly is this going on? So there are commentaries that say that the rainbow existed in nature before the story of the flood, post-flood, before the covenant, and God simply chose that natural phenomenon to be a sign. Others say that before the flood, there actually was no rainbow, either due to the fact that the clouds were too thick or that the light was too weak. They say there was a change in nature, and the natural circumstances before the flood did not allow for rainbows to appear. Just to give you the extremes of commentaries. And then there's in between all types of different comments. Some say it was a rainbow, but no one noticed it because it wasn't significant. So I won't go through all, but there's basically 5 interpretations that Barbanel, Don Isaac Barbanel, the 15th century sage, who was actually part of the Spanish expulsion in 1492, he cites some of the commentaries, and there's the Nachmanides, and there's Akedes Yitzchak. There's a whole bunch of commentaries that Tzemach Tzedek also cites them. So there are sources that elaborate on this topic, which only deepens the mystery of what exactly is this rainbow. And just to throw another monkey wrench into it, if you look in the Pirkei Avot, you'll see a statement that says 10 things were created sunset, Friday evening before Shabbos came, Ben Hashmoshes. And one of them, Keshes, the rainbow. Clearly the rainbow was created the 6th day of creation, at the end of the day, which only, as I said, deepens the questions here. Why so suddenly now the rainbow has significance? And if it was created then, what was the purpose? And why was it created like the 6th day, the end of the 6th day? Why is it just not a process of a natural phenomenon, as I said? The rainbow is just an outgrowth. To say the sun was created, the moon, okay. To say that the animal was created, the human being was created. But the rainbow is just simply a result of natural phenomena. When they converge, create rainbows. So to answer all these questions in one fell swoop, we have to really begin with a preface, something even more important and fundamental. In Judaism in general, and Torah specifically, every experience, every phenomenon, including a natural phenomenon like a rainbow, is more than meets the eye. because it's not just some type of accidental thing. Everything has deeper meaning. Because based on the Teikat Baal Shem Tov, a statement from the Baal Shem Tov, the great Hasidic master, founder of the Hasidic movement, he says that everything that a person sees or hears is a lesson in your life. In other words, life is fraught with meaning wherever you go. Even things you haven't planned, spontaneous, surprises. Everything that you encounter in life, whether it's a person, an event, an occurrence, a natural phenomenon, if you're seeing it, there's some lesson for you. Now, if you think about it, that's a tremendous way of looking at life. That means that life constantly presents something exciting and something meaningful and something relevant to your life. With that type of attitude, nothing should ever be monotonous. Everything was given to you for a reason. So you may have a dilemma you're struggling with, and you're looking for answers everywhere, and the answer may be right in front of your nose. It may be the cab driver has something to say to you. It may be look up to the sky. Maybe it's a rainbow. Maybe something else. So this, in a way, turns life into a completely different type of experience. Everything is an adventure, but not just an adventure, it's an adventure about you. Mishnah, in the Talmud, it says that a person, every human being was created an individual. Animals were created like a herd. It wasn't one cow, it was a group of cows. It wasn't one crocodile, it wasn't one bird. It was the entire species. When it came to the human being was created yechidi, that's the expression in the Talmud, individual. Why? In order to teach us our responsibility, that we can't say, oh, we're part of a group, I won't do it, someone else will do it. It's about the serious responsibility that each of us has to say, Chayev Adam Lema, a person is responsible to say the entire world was created because of me. Not out of arrogance and narcissism, everything is about me. On the contrary, that everything that happens is there for me to do something about it. So you see God forbid, injustice, or you see something positive, is a lesson there. You have to act. We're not just bystanders. We are dynamic participants in the unfolding drama of life itself. This is quintessential Jewish thought. And it really taught this to the human race. We're not passive bystanders. We're part of the whole reality. So with that short preface, when we read or see about a rainbow, it's not just a nice spectacle, a nice sight, take pictures, refracting light, scientific lessons. It has all that. The meteorological circumstances that cause rainbows, and there are different type of rainbows. There are full rainbows, there are full circle rainbows, there are double rainbows, etc. But it's to teach us a lesson. And teach us a lesson means that the rainbow was created in order for us to learn something about it. And that's why God created a rainbow. So when God didn't just look around and say, okay, where am I going to find the sign and a covenant? Hey, there's a rainbow in the sky, because the flood had just ended, so there was clearly a rainbow, if not more than one. But it's actually God created the rainbow in the first place. Since God's the creator, he could have created the world in a way where no rainbows take place. There's a lot of things that could be and that haven't happened. There's a reason he put this into nature. And when you study it, it teaches us about our own personal lives. And also, of course, it brings to light the whole question of the survival of the human race, which is what God ties the rainbow, the covenant of survival after destruction. So that's one preface. Second preface is the responsibility that we all carry in our lives. Many people ask the question, life is very painful. Why is life so difficult? Now, some of us are blessed to have less difficulties than others, but no one is immune of the challenges of life. We will suffer losses, hopefully losses that are of people that are older than us, not, God forbid, younger. It's natural for a person's parents to pass away before they do. That means it's inevitable that in our lifetimes we'll lose a parent, and both parents at some point. May they all live well and be well for many, many years, but there's certain inevitabilities in this world. And then there are other disappointments and losses and traumas that we go through, some man-made, some natural, some that we bring upon ourselves. But we will go through challenges in our lives. That's a given. And philosophers and sociologists and thinkers and psychologists throughout history have always struggled with the question of dealing with the anxieties and the stresses and the upheavals of life. To the point there's actually a disagreement, there's an argument in the Talmud, where Shammai and Hillel, the two classic sages, argue, is it worth being born? Where one says, Nuach la'adam, it's more pleasant for a person to be born than not to be born. And Shammai says it's more pleasant for a person not to be born than to be born, because life is fraught with challenges. A soul, prior to its coming to this world, does not have to deal with health, does not have to deal with mortality, does not have to deal with injustices, with murders, with crime, with all the vices of the human race, with the corruption and the toxins of this world. A soul lives in its own spiritual environment. So based by that contrast, you would think that it's more pleasant not to come to this earth. And actually the ruling is according to Shammai, even though he's usually the ruling is according to Hillel. In this case, he's the one that is considered to be the correct opinion. So then, of course, the obvious question is, so why are we born? If the ruling is more pleasant not to be, so the Rabbi Shneur Zalman of the Yadi gives a very simple and brilliant answer. The expression is nuach. It's more pleasant not to be born, but it's more meaningful to be born. Since when is life about pleasantness? If you talk pleasantness, so you have a Mishnah that says the following, the Talmud in the Ethics of the Fathers. Yafa shah achas, 1 hour of tshuva, of return and good deeds in this world, is worth more than the entire life in the world to come. The entire spiritual existence cannot compare to 1 hour of effort and challenge of this life. But then the Mishnah continues and says, Yofa shachas, and 1 hour of pleasure in the world to come is more than all the pleasures of the entire world, every pleasure that we may experience. It's interesting. So if you talk about pleasure for the human being, it's much more pleasurable not to have a body and physical limitations and all the challenges and dangers that life poses in this world. More pleasant, but more meaningful. Talk about quality, purposeful. Purposefulness is only fulfilled in this world because there's no challenges. Living in Gan Eden, in paradise, in a spiritual realm for a soul, is like a fish in water. It's very pleasurable and very enjoyable, but there's nothing to be achieved. It achieves in growing through study Torah, connecting to God, and so on. But there's no impediment, there's no challenge. So then there's no real growth, there's no real movement. So that's preface number 2. So therefore, it's really a perspective on life. No one said life is easy. We said life is meaningful if you choose to make it so. But many people say, my biggest hope is that life should be easy. It's a wrong request to make. You want to say is, let life be challenging, but give me all the resources I need to overcome and grow through the challenges. That's what we should be requesting or asking for. One of the biggest phenomenons in the best-selling list in the modern age was the book The Road Less Traveled by Scott Peck. You may have heard of it. For 15 years, I think, it was on the best-selling list of the New York Times. It's considered a phenomenon, even though the Bible actually beats it, because it beats it to the point the New York Times doesn't even count it. But many people, like usually with bestsellers, didn't even read the book. But once it becomes a bestseller, you have to have it. Like they said, the Brief History of Time by Stephen Hawkins was also considered a bestseller, the book that sold more and less and not read by anybody that bought it. It was a book that sold very many books, but by most people didn't read it. So Scott Peck's book opens up with the first line, life is difficult. And you ask many people, their surveys I've read, that said, this is a brilliant book. And you ask them, what's so brilliant? They say that opening line, life is difficult. Now, did you really need to read that in a book? But it confirms it. When you hear a writer writes it and it's a best-selling book, there's something about confirmation, validation, that I always thought life was difficult. Now I know it's official because it's written in a book, in a best-selling book. So yes, life is difficult, but we have the strengths to deal with these difficulties. Now, this doesn't mean that we are looking for and searching for difficulties. God should bless us all with as much peace as possible. But don't be surprised when there'll be difficulties in life, because part of the purpose. And indeed, God sent a soul into this world, our souls come into this world, into a difficult world, where we're made to forget the reality from where we arrived. And we come into a world and have to begin from scratch and work our way up. And we're vulnerable to the different forces in life, and hopefully if we're blessed, we have parents and educators and adults that nurture us. But God forbid, that's also not a guarantee, unfortunately. So yes, life is difficult. And if it wasn't, we wouldn't be spending trillions of dollars on therapy. Everybody would just be happy and at peace. And of course, we all know the people who look for happiness never find happiness, because happiness is not a commodity to be found. Happiness is a byproduct, is a result of doing the right things, and then happiness emerges. It's a topic I'm going to talk about in the coming weeks. One of the classes I will discuss this. So with that second preface, let's now go back to the story, the biblical story of the rainbow. And you'll see what is the actual natural phenomenon of a rainbow. So I mentioned before, you need a few ingredients, you need a few conditions for a rainbow to emerge. First of all, you need clouds, because clouds are part of the background that help refract the light. Remember, clouds have the droplets in them. If it's a clear sky, a clear sunny day, there's nowhere for light to be refracted and dispersed. So the clouds are critical for being the backdrop for where. Secondly, you need daylight. Even though it's true there is a phenomenon called a moonlight rainbow, but it's rarer and it's not quite with the colors. So you need sunlight, you need light. So you need a light and you need a cloud. And usually those clouds are a result of a rain, or in this case a flood. So you have the droplets, you have the light, and when they meet in the cloud, as he says here, my rainbow I have set my rainbow in the cloud, clearly focusing on the cloud, and then suddenly something magical happens. The light plus the cloud creates a magnificent array of colors. So what is the significance of that? The significance of that is the metaphor or the analogy of a cloud is, of course, when we say, when I have a cloudy day, or I feel clouded in my life, or if my mind is clouded. Clouds represent a form of blur, darkness, semi-darkness. It's not clear. It's clouded. You can have clouded judgment. You have clouded mind, as I said, clouded emotions. On the other hand, light represents, obviously, clarity. But light without a cloud cannot produce beautiful colors. What this means is the beauty that I described before that can only be achieved in this world. Yafa shah achas. Yafa is the word. That's more beautiful 1 hour of tshuva, of effort, return. The effort that comes through return and good deeds in this world and the entire world to come. The world to come, we know, is full of spiritual delights and all kinds of spiritual pleasures. And yet, the beauty of this world is only possible due to the clouds that this world presents, which represents, in both personally and collectively, the idea of a form of gloom, a form of darkness, or semi-darkness, as I said, that can either go one way or the other. It could either cloud you to the point where you become overwhelmed, or the cloud becomes a backdrop upon which the light, refracting of the droplets in the cloud, produce beautiful beauty. So there's a few analogies given for this. Let's start with the most simple one. If you want to see how powerful something is, it needs resistance. There's no such thing as power without resistance. All energy actually is generated through resistance. You have a positive and a negative, a plus and a minus. On a very basic level, for example, let's say water energy, water power. So how's water power generated? So water may be running in a river. It has a certain speed, but you build a dam. You build a very powerful dam. What happens? The water begins to build up, to the point with such intensity that it can literally create unbelievable amount of energy. To the point that if you don't control it, it can actually destroy the dam and actually be very dangerous, because the dam itself, that once resisted, held back the water, can be broken and become part of a destructive flow of the water just bursting through it and destroying everything in its path. So good water energy, water power is generated by harnessing that power of resistance. Now the truth is in everything. How powerful is your punch? Now God forbid that you're punching anyway. How powerful is your forward thrust? You don't know until there's resistance. If someone just puts a little resistance and you try to push their hand, you don't know how powerful you are. But if you have someone that's very powerful resistance and really gives you a fight, a resistance for your money, so to speak, you suddenly will dig deeper and then you can test your power. The same thing is psychologically and emotionally. When do we see the strengths of human beings? When there's resistance. I don't know who it was that said it. They say Eleanor Roosevelt, whoever. You could say it about all people, but she said it about women. That a woman is like a tea bag. You don't know how strong she is until you put her into hot water. You look at an innocent tea bag, an innocuous tea bag, you don't see anything. Suddenly put it in hot water, and the flavors, the aroma, the power of tea emerges. And this is true across the board. In the Talmud, there's an expression that you don't produce olive oil until you press the olive, which is referred to sometimes and it's analogous to the pressures of life. As a writer, I can tell you, without deadlines, without competition, without accountability and pressure, I'd still be probably at my first article. So it's critical to have the thing you hate most, which is what? Deadline. Clock is ticking. Who likes that? Have to stay up all night, be uncomfortable. Just give me another few weeks, give me another few months, give me another few years or decades. What'll happen? You won't end up doing anything. And that's what's called harnessing. In our own time, one of the most powerful forms of surgery today that has saved so many lives and have produced also results with so little collateral damage is laser energy. What's laser energy at the end of the day? Instead of scattered light, it's focused light. So scattered light may illuminate something, but it can't cut through something. You focus light in total concentration, and you can create unbelievable, you can pierce anything, including, as I said, different microsurgery that's done today with laser tools and so on. All the examples of harnessing and pressure, what it does to any given situation. And the same is true in the shaping of a human being. If we did not have the pressures, whether at school, the work, the need to excel, we would never excel. The greatest athletes, the greatest musicians, the greatest anything. You show me some greatness and you'll immediately be able to trace it to some form of pressure that led them there. Either an opponent, an athlete that gave them a real run for their money, some humiliation, some loss, learning from our mistakes. The list goes on. I don't know if I have to elaborate any further. What does it all come down to? Where is it seen in a natural phenomenon? That's the clouds of our lives. That's the way you create colors. Without it, you could have a white light, but you're not going to have the whole spectacular spectrum of all the colors unless you'll have clouds with droplets in them. And the sun represents, as I said, the light that produces it, but it must have the resistance of the cloud to create the rainbow. So obviously, therefore, it's very appropriate that what was the flood all about? The flood was all about human beings self-destructing. That's what happened. God created a world, a beautiful world, a Garden of Eden. But he gave the human being free will, free choice, to choose between right and wrong. And the humans, unfortunately, chose the wrong. Adam and Eve. And then their children, Cain killed Abel. And the generations began to degenerate and devolve and what's the word? Things got worse and worse till 10 generations later, the end of the last week's chapter of Genesis, God said, look what's happened to my world. I entrusted it to the human being. I gave them all the resources. I gave them all the blessings. But they messed it up. not as many people think God suddenly regretted, even though it says the word regret, but he was not regretting. Of course he understood. He gave human beings free will, but he saw self-destruction. He gave us the ability, the right, the choice to be able to self-destruct. Mala aretz chamas. The world was filled with crime. And what kind of crime? Crimes of man against man. Murder. Greed. To the point that literally the human race self-destructed. And it was important to state this for the record because God wanted to show generations to come what humans can do to themselves when they're not disciplined. And you see it throughout history. Not almost, every empire has fallen on its sword. The Roman Empire, no one ever thought would go anywhere. But at the end of the day, greed, selfishness, self-interest, that's not harnessed and that's not found some type of mutual higher cause will self-destruct. And not one empire has survived. Not one. Not the Egyptian Empire, not the Assyrian Empire, not the Babylonians, not the Persians, not the Greeks, not the Romans, and not the Ottoman. No empire survived. Many people attribute, actually, the United States to its success, and some also argue to its failure, to the basic principles of the Declaration of Independence, which was nothing mentioned there about self-interest. Nowhere does it say that we're building a country in order to make a lot of money. We're saying this country is built on the principles of the Bill of Rights, the human rights, that we are all created equal, and we have inalienable rights to the pursuit of happiness, the freedom of expression, of religion, and so on. If you think about it, it's the only institutionalized country until the first institutionalized country that institutionalized the basic principles that there's a God, there's a creator. And not dictating religion, but dictating that by the virtue of this creator, we all are equal. And no one can say, I'm the monarch or the church leader that's better than thou and closer to God. And that many attribute to the success of this empire. And many say when you lose that, you become too materialistic, you'll destroy. Capitalism is not divine. Every system has died till now in history. So why should our system not? Unless we're able to transcend our self-destructive capacity. So God wanted to show, right in the beginning of the Bible, He created the world with all its beauty and then showed what human beings can stoop to. And then came the flood. The flood was not a punishment. The flood was cause and effect. The ultimate clouds of humanity is when human beings become corrupt. You'll find many historians, when they describe Nazi Germany, they'll say the clouds began to descend on Europe. The word clouds you find all through the Dark Ages, fascist empires. Clouds are always the words used. The clouds began to cover up, because clouds are that metaphor for blurry, for confusion, for darkness, for shrouding things. So the cloud is not just some nice little metaphor here. It happens to be really significant. So what did God choose of all things as a covenant that I will never destroy the world? He didn't want to. He could have chosen the sun. What better thing? Look at the sun. The sun is a bright, shining sun. That's my covenant, that there'll always be a bright sun and I will not destroy the world. But that's not realistic. God said, I know this world can become corrupt again. That was the whole reason for the covenant. God knew that whatever happened till now could happen again. Human beings can again begin to become corrupt. So the point of this sign, the covenant, was to find something in the world of clouds where human being, in their vulnerabilities and in their fragility and in their capacity to be weak and corrupt, to find a silver lining, no pun intended, in that cloud. That's why He chose the rainbow, because the rainbow is precisely that. It's the interesting paradox between a dark cloud and light, between the droplets of the cloud and the light that causes such beautiful hues and such beautiful, what do you call what's the expression? Cornucopia, I think, whatever. I forgot the expression. Yeah. And that's what it shows. Now, this has tremendous significance to us personally in our own lives as well. Because we too have both as that individually and collectively. You could ask the question, what really preserves us from killing each other? We know self-interest is a very powerful force. Self-interest means me more important than everybody else. Why do we coexist? So some people say, okay, because part of self-preservation is you better coexist with others or they can kill you if you're going to kill them. And yet we do see societies that have self-destroyed. So what really is where's the check and balance? So God provided to us over 4,000 years ago. He says it's the rainbow. I'm not looking for perfection. It's fine to have clouds. But ultimately, the promise I make to you, the covenant is, that if you use your human weaknesses and your human nature, though it could be cloudy, but you understand that there's a purpose in it, because I'm sending your soul into a world that has clouds and darkness, in order for you to discover deeper light. That is the secret to ultimately not the self-destroying. If you think you're a self-made person and you forget about your mission, then you're opening yourself up to the dangers of true self-destruction. So in a sense, the rainbow is exactly what we are looking for. We're not looking for the perfection. We're looking for something that comes out of the clouds of our lives. But what comes out is the beauty and the colors. Now, if we had very beautiful lives where a person, let's say, was a tzaddik, they never sinned, they never transgressed. So it would be a very nice life, but it wouldn't be very colorful, right? It wouldn't be rainbow. What do they say? That I want heaven for the climate, but hell for the company. And that's a joke, obviously. Why? Because heaven is very beautiful. But if you want a little excitement, you need hell. Because in heaven, everybody's a saint. It's not a lot of fun, so to speak. It's not colorful. The truth is it is, but from our perspective, it's not colorful because a person who's a straight shooter is always so-called vanilla, always white light. You want colors, you need to have challenges. You need to have situations where you're tempted and you overcome a temptation, where you may be seduced and you stand strong. That's where the colors of life emerge. So the rainbow is actually a perfect metaphor and a perfect example of a covenant. And that's why it says that God needs to be reminded. Not that he needs to be reminded. Of course he made the covenant. He knows what he's promising not to destroy the world. Obviously he created the world. He doesn't want to destroy it. But he's trying to say is the following. That there's going to be plenty of times in history and plenty of times in your personal life where you may do things to yourself that are very destructive. And there may be a consideration that maybe you don't deserve to continue with the blessings that you were given. Maybe you should be allowed to self-destruct. God says, I won't let you self-destruct. Not individually and not collectively. Because I will always show you that there's a rainbow. I will be reminded, just as you will be reminded, that there's a rainbow in everything. And if you turn it around, you can find beautiful colors in any given situation. So in Hasidic thought, and based on Kabbalistic thought, the idea of a rainbow is Tiferet, Tiferes. You have Chesed, Gvura, Tiferes. If you're familiar with the 10 spheres, so you have the 3 intellectual, then you have the first 3 emotional. Chesed is love. Gvura is discipline. Chesed is like the sun, and Gvura is like the clouds. Gvura conceals. Gvura is a tzimtzum, is a concealment. Chesed is a revelation, it's a flow. And what do they produce? Tiferes. Tiferes is called beauty. They actually have colors. Blue and red. Chesed and Gvura, blue and red. Sometimes bluish white and red. And together they create the combination called Tiferes. Tiferes is either a combination of all 3 colors, green as well, or all 7, which I'll soon discuss. Now, what exactly is Tiferes? So think of it this way. Blue. What's your favorite color? Some people say blue. Some people like green. But blue is the most favorite color for most people. Now, we know that red, even though it has power, but red's like red lights. It always elicits fear, elicits caution. That's why red is used, because red psychologically elicits in us a certain element of gvura, yira, fear, hold up, and so on. So, as beautiful as the color blue may be, or as beautiful as the color red may be, but you don't call it beauty. Because beauty is never one-dimensional. A beautiful painting is many hues, many shades, many different details. A beautiful face is not just a beautiful nose or beautiful eyes, it's a beautiful combination of the complexion, the eyes, the nose, the mouth, the whole facial structure, and then you have beauty. It's actually very difficult to really quantify what is beautiful. Beauty in the eyes of the beholder. And yet there are things that are objectively beautiful, has a certain symmetry to it, a certain balance. So beauty is always, interestingly, we'll call it harmony within diversity. Take music. You can have a beautiful musical note, but how long can you listen to one note? It'll become monotonous and noise at some point. What's true beautiful composition, a beautiful symphony? Many different notes combined, and you have a song. A symphony, an orchestra, you'll always find beauty is associated with many, a multitude, but there's some symmetry, some harmony within that diversity. Nature itself is that way. Nature is made up of billions of different forces, millions of species, but they work in a certain coordinated way. A healthy human body. Think about it. We have 75 trillion cells. We have hundreds of systems. Limbs, organs, nerves, the circulatory system, the neurological system, and it all works together in a healthy human being. It's a miracle. What creates that symmetry? But the beauty here is not that it's one thing. If it was one celled organism, okay, there's no competition. The beauty is always when you have the combination of many, but directed toward one focus, toward one objective. So basically the Tiferes is the rainbow. The rainbow is many forces at work, all leading toward one direction. But here's the catch. When you have many forces at work, there's always a risk for discord and for chaos. If you only had one celled organism, if you only had one color, one musical note, you can't have chaos. Because there's no competition, as I said. There's no one competing for anything. There's only one sound. So that's the interesting twist. That for there to be beauty, there has to be the potential for ugliness and for chaos. And this is actually hinted to in last week's chapter. When God creates the world, it says, day 1, day 2, and day 3. So what does it say? Every day it says that God saw what he created and said it was good. Except on day 2. That statement is not made. V'yara l'kim ki tov does not stated on day 2. Why? Day 2 was the creation of the heavens, the firmaments, the higher waters and the lower waters were separated. Why is that not good? So the Medrash gives a powerful answer, which also connects to the whole rainbow theme. It says, day 1 is the creation of unity. Let there be light. It's the sun. It's chesed. That's Sunday. That's why it's Sunday. Sun. The sun actually was created day 4, but light. So what you have is unity. The only thing that dominated was Yom Echad, the Achdus, the unit, divine unity. Day 2 was this creation of separation, of two-ness, of a duality. As soon as you have 2, you already have potential for machlekes, for chaos, for discord, and ultimately for divisiveness. It's not necessary, but potential. Day 1, there can be machlekes, there can be disagreement because there's nothing to disagree with. There's nothing else exists. It's like one opinion. Day 2, there are 2 opinions. That's why you can't call it good, because we don't know how it's going to turn out. Comes day 3 and says, I unite the 2 different forces into one unit. I hear the opinion of one, I hear the opinion of the other, and I come away with a mediation, a reconciliation. So like we say in the morning prayer, that Shnei ksuvim machishim zeh et zeh. You have 2 verses that contradict each other. Uba kosav ha shlishi. Comes the 3rd verse, machriya beineim, and it reconciles between the 2. This is what Jews call shalom, the greatest blessing. What is the greatest blessing? Shalom. Shalom aleich. There should be peace. Lo motza kadosh baruch hu keli machzik bracha el hashalom. God could not find a container that contains peace. Contains blessing, accept peace. Barchenu avinu, kulanu kechad. When we're one, that's when the blessings reside. Shalom. Now, what is shalom in Hebrew? Peace in English can be also mean the absence of war is peace. But no, shalom in Hebrew means much more than the absence of war. It means a state of wholesomeness. Shalom also means completeness. And that's the day 3. So day 1, you have one color, one sound, unity. Day 2, you have 2, which is necessary to achieve beauty, but you still don't know which direction it's going. And day 3 creates the harmony within the diversity. Tiferes, the rainbow. And that's why you find the number 3 so prominent in Jewish thought. You find the Bezdin, the Court of Law, is 3. You find that in the Talmud, in the Shabbos, it talks about Shavuos, when the Torah was given, a whole list of 3s. In the 3rd month was given the Torah that's made up of 3, Tanakh, Torah, Nevi'im, Ksuvim, to a nation of 3, Kohanim, Levites, and Israelites. It was on the 3rd day of the week, in the 3rd hour, not 3rd day of the week, I'm sorry, it was Shabbos. It was on the 3rd, in the 3rd month, on the 3rd, a whole bunch of 3s that related, because it's not just a number, because 3 represents the rainbow. It represents diversity. Now, when you have one color, you have one type of person on earth who's a goody-goody, a great guy, a great woman, excellent. But you don't have the purpose for what this world was created. And that's the Yafa Sha'achas. God says, you want beauty? You need to come down to a world where there's clouds, and sometimes very dark clouds. And that's where beauty is created. You're not going to find beauty in a clear sky. You're going to find it in a dark night, in a dark day, when there's clouds. The day after the flood, which demonstrated how bad people can get, how self-destructive they can be. And yet, here's what I show you. I will look up into the heavens, and you look up into the heavens, and here's my covenant. I've created beauty in clouds. That will be the covenant that will remind us all of what we can achieve, even when things are challenging. So how does that translate in simple English? It translates that we have before us the secret of really the purpose of why we're here in this world. To know, first of all, there will be clouds. Rest assured, there's no human being that will not have a cloudy day. And there'll be many clouds, and they'll take on different shapes. 2 things can happen. You can get overwhelmed and say, what can I do? Or you can realize the promise God made in this, as kashti nasati ba'anan, he says. That's the word. My rainbow, my divine rainbow, I've placed in this cloud. Find it. You're not going to find it in heaven with souls without a body. You'll find it in this universe that's full of diversity, with potential for conflict, with potential for discord, for potential for divisiveness. But you could be wiser and don't let the diversity that I've created deceive you. See it as a challenge for you to bring together different forces and create beauty. And how many different forces are there? 7. There's 7 structures, 7 days of the week, which correspond to the 7 emotional spheres. Chesed, Gvura, Teferes, Netzach, Chayid, Yesod, Malchus. The 7. And each one of them is one of the colors that I mentioned before. Want to know if I could do it again? Okay. The colors are, we started with red, orange, green, yellow, blue, indigo, and violet. Those are the 7 colors. And they correspond to the 7 emotions. As a matter of fact, when Isaac Newton, they say Aristotle was the first philosopher that analyzed the rainbow. But he's not the first. Anyone reading Bible knows the rainbow plays prominent, and all the commentaries talk about it. But later, as scientists begin to develop, Isaac Newton first defined 5 colors in the rainbow. And then he recognized 7, when you break it down, which correspond, by the way, to the 7 notes in the musical scale and to the 7 days of the week. And those that know the Kabbalistic mystical picture, the 7 emotional faculties, divine faculties. So the rainbow doesn't begin on earth. The rainbow begins in the cosmic levels of diversity. Just as God created 7 days in the week, he created 7 dimensions. And we have generally 7 emotions. If you're familiar with my Omer book, the spiritual guide to counting the Omer, so I delineated 7 times 7, 49. Each one has a role to play. And there's no healthy human being without all 7. Someone says, I have love. You could think, I have love. What else do I need? No. Love without gevura, without discipline, can be as destructive as discipline without love. I'll give an example. We called gevura's gshamim, rain, the gevura of rain. Now rain, what would you associate rain with? Usually it's water. It's a blessing, right? The blessing of rain. But rain is a blessing if it comes in raindrops. If it comes like a flood, it destroys the field just as much as a drought would destroy the field. Maybe even worse. Because it completely destroys everything. That's why you have the story in the Talmud in Tainus when when Chene Hamagel prayed for rain. So the rain started after a drought and became coming down in buckets. So he says, Reiv Teva ein yechel l'kabel. Such abundance of good we cannot receive, we cannot contain. So he had to have a second prayer that the rain should come as raindrops, drop by drop, so the earth can absorb it before the next drop comes. So love is a beautiful attribute. But if you don't have the gas without the brakes, you can destroy your children with love. You give too much. You give in ways they cannot contain. You overwhelm them. You're giving on your terms, not on their terms. There's a whole series. Like a teacher can be a brilliant teacher, but if he's not recognizing the student's pace and doesn't spoon feed it properly, he can destroy them with his so much abundance. On the other hand, gvura without chesed obviously is equally problematic. Only discipline without any kindness. And if you go down the spectrum, which I'm not going to do here because I said I did in the book, Umrah book, each one of the colors of the rainbow, each one of the emotionals adds a dimension that the others don't have. And they all need each other. So then you come to Tiferes, which is compassion and beauty, as I mentioned. There's Netzach, just briefly, determination, ambition, drive. There's Hoid, which is yielding, flexibility. There's Yesod, bonding. And finally, there is Malchus, dignity. These are the 7 emotions necessary in every spectrum. And it's a rainbow. If you go to divine unity all the way to the source, there you find one divine unity. But God wanted unity within a world of diversity. That's the whole purpose. A rainbow. And for there to be a rainbow, there has to be a concealment. Because if you don't conceal divine unity, there's no room for others. What the Rizal calls the Tzimtzum Harishon, the first big cloud, is the Tzimtzum. Because if you don't have the tzimtzum, you have the divine light is so intense, it's all encompassing, all pervasive, and does not leave room for another entity. So you need a big cloud, but within that cloud lies embedded colors waiting to be released. And each one of us here has those colors. We all have the 7 colors, but some of us have dominant so-called genes. Some of us by chesed may be stronger than our gevura. Some people are excellent in organization. Their gevura is very good. Some tiferes. Each one of us has our strengths. And we all need each other and we all complement each other. Take the biggest case of discord is what? Some people say nations, empires, communities, religions. No. The biggest place of discord is marriage. That was the first machlekes of all, Adam and Eve. He blamed her, she blamed him. They both blamed the serpent. They all blamed God. A lot of blame going around, a lot of finger pointing. Because it all begins with what? A very simple problem, or also blessing. It says God created the human being as one androgynous entity, male and female, in the divine image. Okay, great. One entity can't really argue with each other. But then God did something that changed history forever, and till this day we have marital therapy as a result. Remember, all industries, by the way, that we have today were all born in the Garden of Eden. The garment industry, after they ate from from the tree, that's when they wore garments for the first time. Obviously the food industry, and of course here is the marital therapy industry. What was happened? So God said, I will separate the male and female into 2. And then they will seek out each other because they are part of one whole, soulmates. But as soon as you separate, you right away leave room for conflict. It would have been a lot simpler if you only married yourself, basically, so to speak, or someone that's a clone of yourself. But that's not how it works. That's not how it works. Even though we're soulmates, fundamentally, but we grow up in different homes, and we may not know each other, different cultures sometimes, and different attitudes. And the stage is set for every type of conflict possible, because not that you can't argue with your brothers and sisters as well, but definitely a stranger. And yet we're expected, as much as it's kosher kriyas yamsuf, as a marriage, which means as difficult as the parting of the sea. Why? Because land and water are opposites. And you can, man is land and woman is water. So it's difficult to part, but God said, I give you the power that I have, that if you work on it, you'll find the rainbow. You'll find the colors. If you don't work on it, and you're lazy or self-absorbed, then obviously everything's going to bother you. She's not like me, he's not like me, and everything down to whether you squeeze the toothpaste from the middle of the tube or the edge at the bottom of the tube is going to become an issue. But if you look through the cloud, I separated them, the man and female, for a reason, just like I created at Tzimtzum for a reason. Just like I send the soul down to this earth and conceal the divine spiritual presence of the soul from us. There's a reason, because in this cloud is the beauty that you cannot achieve had you just been one. That's the challenge. Here you have a woman that a man may never understand, a man that women definitely find, inferior or complicated or simplistic, however you want to put it. And the battle goes on. You know the joke going around Silicon Valley about the computer, whether the computer is male or female? You're familiar with that one? So initially, they come up with the fact that what is a computer? So someone says it's definitely a male. Why? Because it's filled with data, but it's clueless. Okay? That's one approach. Now, then comes the other way around, is that that it must be female, because no one can understand it except its creator. And one computer and one woman speaks to another, and no one else can understand, only programmers. Only women can understand each other. But then on the other hand, a computer is like a male. Why? Because when you buy one, if you just waited 6 more months, you could have found a better one, But on the other side, they say, the computer is like a woman, because getting the computer is relatively cheap, but the accessories are going to cost you forever, And then finally, they go back and they say, why is it a male? I forgot already. I think the final conclusion that it's a woman. Why? Because a computer never forgets. You do one thing, it's recorded forever. Okay, so there you have it. Now you can have the men use it the one side of it, the women will use the other side, but that's obviously not the point. The point is to create a rainbow. So you'll find throughout life, you'll find this theme. You begin with something unified, then it splits into parts with a potential for chaos, potential for divisiveness, potential for discord and war, or the potential for beauty. Can you imagine a beautiful family sitting around a table? And everyone is absolutely different. This one is more cerebral, this one's more emotional, they have different approaches. This one's pro-Trump, this one's pro-Hillary. I didn't want to even get there, but I couldn't resist. And this one's pro none of them or against everybody, But they're able to communicate because they love each other. And everyone sees that others have a contribution to make that I may not pick up on my own, because that person has a perspective I wouldn't have. Obviously, it requires security, and it requires a certain being at peace with yourself. Because if you feel threatened or you feel insecure, you feel someone's taking something away from you or criticizing you, it's going to be hard for you to coexist with others. But it's not an impossible scenario. I'm sure we all can envision it. Now, of course, what happens is you say, I'm ready for that, but the other person starts fighting. Okay, I'm not going to get into who's the problem. But the bottom line is, there is beauty. There is rainbows to be found in the clouds. So it's not just a covenant made 40,121 years ago. It's a covenant being made every moment. And you see the rainbows everywhere. Sometimes you see them physically, after a rain, but sometimes you see them spiritually or psychologically or emotionally, if you're looking close. I can speak and tell you that one of the greatest gifts in my life is the people I've met, the people I continue to meet. I can't tell you how much joy it brings to me when I meet diversity, because I see the colors that God created. Now, I don't always agree with somebody, and sometimes adamantly disagree. And I'm not talking about now someone doing anything destructive or harmful. We're talking about the diversity. But nevertheless, there's a diversity, and it's fascinating. 7 billion people on this earth, no two look alike. Like no two snowflakes alike. There's a beauty to that. And all of them express another droplet reflecting another aspect of the divine mosaic. And all together come together and create a rainbow, create a harmony. Now, obviously, I say again, this doesn't give anyone a license to do things that are destructive or criminal. There are things that are acceptable, things that are not acceptable. I'm talking about the diversity per se. So there is a journey that we're on to find the beauty and the harmony and the rainbows in our lives. Now, it's interesting that after the flood, part of the rainbow, they call Rainbow Coalition, the first Rainbow Coalition was 7 Noahide laws that were given to Noah after the flood, that were meant to be the bedrock and the foundations of civilization. 7, like the 7 colors of the rainbow. So God didn't just give him a rainbow; He also gave him a code of laws. That if we followed those code of laws, all of us, we would have the utopian world we all dream of. What are the 7 laws? There is accepting a higher authority. There's not to desecrate that higher authority, to defile or in any way. There's the respect for life, meaning not to murder. The respect for family and for the sanctity of sexuality, not to be decadent in that regard. There's the respect for animals. There's respect for property. And the respect for law. Did I count 7? Those 7. And they correspond to the 7 emotions and to the 7 colors. So it's not just a rainbow in the sky, it's a rainbow in our lives. And actually, going back to the United States, essentially the foundation, some of the presidents have written this in their letters, that the bedrock and the foundations of this country are based on these Noahide laws, the universal laws of civilization. Now, if you had everybody following them, tell me what kind of world. No theft, no murder, intact marriages, fidelity, respect for nature and animals and the environment, of course God, not desecrating God, and finally law, establishing law and order. Now obviously each one of them have many subsets and derivatives and so on, but that's the foundations. So all this is the theme of this week's chapter, interestingly coming right after the high holidays, right after the Genesis, the book of Bereshit, the chapter of Bereshit that we read. After the Genesis, the creation, now we come to the next step, which is how to build a healthy world. We've seen what kind of destruction human beings can bring, can wreak, and how to build a Olam Chadash, a new world, which is what Noah was charged with. And from there, it would go 10 generations to Abraham and the rest of history. And that year, there you have it. The rainbow is the central component of how you build harmony within diversity, both individually and collectively. So let me conclude with a blessing to everyone. We should have a very blessed year, a blessed month, blessed life, and recognize both within yourself, even the conflicting voices you may have, as well as with others, family, children, spouse, community, and obviously nations and empires and the entire world, to always recognize that we're looking for that harmony within the diversity. And ultimately, when Mashiach comes, we'll have that rainbow. The ultimate rainbow, it says, will be when Mashiach comes, a rainbow of that harmony within diversity. So until next week, everyone have a very blessed week, and we continue this journey. Please stay in touch, meaningfullife.com, and any way we could help. We're all part of this diversity. Everyone have a very blessed week. Be well.